Okay.
Good afternoon. If I get everyone's attention, we're going to get started. So we're starting. Hello everyone, my name is Lindsay Huddleston with Michigan's Children. Proud to be here to welcome you guys to this, everything you need to know about the legislative process. And you couldn't have a better panel of individuals. You may have been looking to see two representatives, Representative Kirk Vanderwall and Representative Morgan Foreman, who were going to be on the panel, but unfortunately they're delayed because of a very important vote to actually address some issues that have been discussed earlier, referring to the transgender bill and legislation. So more than likely they won't be able to make it, not because they don't want to come support Michigan's children, but because duty comes first. I've had the pleasure of knowing these great individuals who are going to be presenting you today, and I'll just start from my right. Former state rep Harvey Santana. Harvey's been a great friend of Michigan's children over the years. He's been a moderator in the past, and had we had our two representatives, he would be standing right here doing an excellent job. He's going to be able to be available to share some information for you, and he's also very much involved in the legislative process now. And there's another Santana around these parts that he's very familiar with as well. That's another conversation. In the middle is someone I have the pleasure of saying I've known since I pretty much came to Lansing in his former life, being part of the executive detail for Governor Granholm, but to show his intellect and his very great familiarity with the political process. He is now Vice President of Government Affairs at GCSI, Governmental
Consulting Services Incorporated.
Yep, say that fast, say that fast. But also a very good friend and very knowledgeable. And another gentleman you may be familiar with, and I must say, going back to the Granholm days, I had the pleasure of getting to know our president and CEO, Matt, as well. Gillett, who you heard from earlier, former state rep, the Alpena area. If you need to know, just pull your map out. It's near the thumb. And has been a great leader, been a great advocate, and he's actually stepping in as a pitch hitter, but that makes perfect sense that we have him to be able to share. So with that, maybe we can get you guys to make some opening comments in general, and we can kind of see what we have. And I definitely want this to be an engagement as far as back and forth and posing questions and questions, comments, or whatever it be. And all three of these gentlemen have very tough skin, so I have no problem doing that, right? So with that, Harvey, you want to start with?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I hope that you all walk away with something more than what you walked in with. I served from 2011 to 2016. Governor Snyder was the governor when I was here. I was in the minority the entire time that I served. And then after my time in the legislature, I went to work for Governor Snyder for 2 years, working on criminal justice reform issues and issues related to urban communities. And then I eventually became a lobbyist and working on still criminal justice reform issues and doing crime victim advocacy work.
Okay, good. Again, good afternoon, everyone. So happy to be here. My name is, like I said, Dwayne Gill, and I've been involved in politics, I would say, since 2010. I was with the Michigan State Police for 29 years. And I used to, as he said, I used to be Governor Granholm's and Governor England's bodyguard. I was on the executive protection detail for them, which gave me a little bit of insight to the legislative process.
And they stayed alive too, so
So one day Governor Granholm got in the car. Obviously, I'm one of the drivers, and she says, "You know, Dwayne, somebody told me that you would make a good lobbyist." And I asked her, I said, "What's a lobbyist?" And so then she explained to me what they do and they advocate. I said, that'd be something that would be fun. So a few years later, that position for the lobbyist for the state police became available. I put in for it, I got it. It gave me an opportunity to learn about the legislative process, learn how to lobby, learn how to advocate for your position on certain bills and whatnot. I did that for 4 to 5 years with the state police. After I retired from state police in 2022, the House and the Senate flipped to Democratic control, and GCSI, the company I work for, contacted me and said, would I like to come aboard and be a lobbyist with them in their multi-client firm. I did that. The two people that I called when I was asked to come to GCSI were Harvey and Lindsay. I didn't call anyone else. I just wanted to know, what do you think I should ask them to pay me? A lot. And a lot. And they were very, yep, and I got it, and this is where I am. So, but with that being said, I have a very nice portfolio of clients. I've got a bunch of municipalities that I represent. So I have the city of Inkster, Flint, Detroit, Ypsilanti. I also have Washington County. I've got 2 museums, the Detroit Historical Museum, Charles Wright Museum of African American History, and Detroit Public Schools. So I've got a very wide-ranging portfolio of clients I represent, and I'll end with this. The thing about lobbyists, especially a multi-client a lobbyist, you got to know a little bit about everything to be dangerous, and it's just a good job to learn about advocacy here in the Michigan legislative process. So happy to be here, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dwayne. So I'm Matt Gillard, as Lindsay said, the President and CEO of Michigan's Children. I did my sentence, I like to say, or served in the legislature from 02 to 08. I came in 2002 when Governor Granholm was first elected, and served in the minority my first 2 terms. The Republicans were in control of both chambers of the legislature at that time, but we had a Democratic governor, and then in my 3rd and final term of the legislature in the House, we took the majority, the Democrats took the majority of the House. So a similar dynamic to really what we're operating under right now, where we had a Democratic governor, then the Democrats in control of one chamber of the House, of the legislature, and the Republicans in control of the other, so divided government, and also similar to what, unfortunately, we're heading into right now, and is a very difficult budgeting situation. Back at that time, we had no money. The state had no money. Our state revenues had dried up, and there was, up until we came, no real appetite to raise revenues, and expenses were continuing to rise, and so we had very challenging budget situations. Actually went all the way up to the deadline and beyond. My first year when we were in the majority with the budget, and a lot of people are starting to point to that as something that we're probably looking at this year with divided government and a challenging budget situation, a similar dynamic in that way. So I turned out of the legislature at the end of that session, like I said, in 08, and have been doing child policy and advocacy work since. I did specifically early childhood policy and advocacy work for a number of years, right after serving in the legislature, and then now I've been at Michigan's Children almost 12 years now, which has been a great role for me. It allowed me to continue to work on early childhood issues, which is something I was very passionate about, but to broaden that beyond, because Michigan's Children is really a cradle through career advocacy organization. So as Lindsay said, I know all these gentlemen as well, but we have thick skin, and I somehow seem to lost my filter along the way here a few years ago as well. So I will speak freely and openly about my thoughts, and really hope to answer questions that folks have and have a dialogue about what folks want to know and learn about the often ugly game of the Michigan legislature and the legislative process.
Great introduction, gentlemen. What I'm going to do, I'm going to reread the overview to kind of get us locked into what we really want to get out of this. Everything you want to know about the legislative process and a little more. Join us for a savvy assembly of pundits as they share stories, identify how legislative advocacy works, and the process for seeking budget appropriations and policy changes. We'll explain how a bill becomes a law, the state budget process, committee influences, and developing allies, targets, and champions. We'll provide advice for creating a year-round advocacy calendar that puts grassroots groups in the best position to press their case for positive change. And what I also will say, this is a very intimate group. Not just because I know these individuals, you have a great wealth of knowledge here, and I want to challenge everyone in your mind, for the most part, that everyone needs to pretty much think of a question or a comment that can be engaged. Yes, Lisa.
All right, I'll start you off, and I'd like to start you off at your very, very, very beginning of an elected position. How did it come about? Because I'm asking for a personal reason. I've had twice in the last handful of years, somebody in my community has asked if I've ever considered running for city council. And that question absolutely terrifies me, because I just love being an advocate, and I like working for a nonprofit, and being on an elected position terrifies me, but other people see some goodness in me, and I would imagine at some point somebody saw this with you all. So I'm just wondering, when was that bridge that you went from not being an elected somebody to being an elected someone, even if it was some short, smaller, like, board of trustees somewhere or what have you?
Go ahead, Harvey, you start.
I knew when I was 7. That's a joke we got. No, I knew when I was probably in high school that at some point I wanted to be in politics. But like everything else in life, it takes time, maturity. You have to self-educate yourself. And what I always tell people in this business, if you're trying to start out, do you know who you are? Because if you don't know who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in, and what you will and what you will not support, that building across the street, they're gonna twist you up and down to make you whatever they want you to be. So sometimes you'll see that there are elected officials who are pretty defensive or kind of guarded. It's because they have to be, because it's a defense mechanism, because they're trying to protect themselves and how they view the world and the decisions that they make, right? And I think that it has to come from a very genuine place of wanting to serve, okay? When I ran and won in 2010, $72,000 a year was pretty decent. Today, you're not gonna get me up here to run for that. I mean, it's 55 grand after taxes, when you divide that by the 12 months, when you figure out what the bills are, you're in debt, right? So if it's for financial reasons, that's the wrong way to look at it. What is it that you see that is the problem in the world? What is it that people want to fix? And what do you honestly think you can do about it, right? And if you can at least try to answer some of those questions in an honest way, then you're well on your way to making a decision about what it is you want to do.
Yeah, I would say from my standpoint, similar to Harvey, I think I knew at a pretty young age. I was involved, in student government and other things in high school, and grew up in Alpena. My grandfather and my father were both attorneys. We had a family law practice that it was kind of, that was my plan coming out of high school. I went to college, went on to law school, moved back up into Alpena, and was starting to work at the family law firm. And at the time, my predecessor, Andy Newman, was in office, was a state rep, and we have term limits, obviously, right, in Michigan, where you can do 3 2-year terms. He was in the middle of his second term. I, along like most folks, assumed that he would run for a 3rd term, and I had been kind of pointing to the fact that it would be open, right? You weren't going to challenge an incumbent, especially he was a Democrat, one of the same party. And so I kind of assumed that would be the potential path for me to pursue running for state office, for state rep. But because of term limits, the state Senate seat opened up in the middle of Andy's second term, so he chose to forego his 3rd House term to run for that open state Senate seat. So then I ended up running for that state rep seat sooner rather than I anticipated or had initially planned. But it was something that I had been interested in. I think because of term limits in Michigan especially, at least at the state legislative level, that often dictates the timing of when it makes sense to run, depending upon what district you're in. But I would encourage you, Lisa, and anybody else, especially at the local level. Now, I didn't serve in local government. The first thing I ever ran for was state rep. And that's not uncommon, but I think more common is people who have local elected experience, even at the school board level or local government or other things. And getting engaged and getting involved, I think, is critically important. It is critically important for child advocates, for people who are here. The people that came here care about kids. We need more people that care first and foremost about kids and families in elected positions at every level.
Great. Way to get started out, Lisa. Dwayne, I'm going to come to you with this question that can dovetail to both Harvey and Matt. What's a common mistake individuals make when they're trying to get a legislative advocacy plan together, when they're trying to work with something, whether it's your clients who are trying to figure out the process or just individuals who want to learn how to navigate this process when they come to legislators? What's a common mistake or some challenges that they may run into going forward?
Well, good question. A lot of times I would say that clients may not know exactly what their objective is and what they're trying to accomplish. So they may have a big world view of something, but they need to have something, they need to narrow in on exactly what it is that they want to accomplish with approaching a legislator. And that's what our jobs are as lobbyists. So I don't know, like I said, if you all know what a lobbyist does. A lobbyist is an advocate for their client. So that was, I found this out later on when the governor, I asked her what do they do. But bottom line is, you have to find someone who a lobbyist or yourself or whoever's advocating for you, you have to make sure you know what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Sit down and write it down and just know in detail so that when you do go to a lobbyist and you do go to speak with your legislator, you can explain what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And they can then take that idea or plan and place it into a prospective bill and then run it for you, and they'll become your champion. So, two things: know what it is that you want, be detailed, and make sure you identify a champion that can get this thing done for you.
Very good, Harvey.
You know, on the receiving end of it, if 4 of you walked in with Dwayne to lobby me about funding or policy change or something, because, you know, I've developed a good relationship over, you know, we're starting off in a good place. So I'm gonna trust him that he's bringing a good client in front of me to talk about their issues and their needs. But then I'm gonna poke a little bit under the net and I'm gonna start asking you about yourself. I'm like, who's your state representative? Who's your state senator? If you don't know, that's gonna tell me you're not really engaged in this process, right? And if you sign in, my name is Joyce Smith, where are you from? So and so. I'm gonna go back in the computer and figure out how many times has Joyce Smith voted in the last 10 years. Because you want me to devote 40 hours a week for the next 2 weeks on your issue, but you haven't even taken the time to vote in the last 20 years. Especially if you're one of my constituents, because they're the ones that give you the hardest time, right? So that would be one thing. The other thing that the lobbyist should be able to do before you come to the lawmaker is learn something about that lawmaker. You're advocating on behalf of children. Is this a single man who's living his best life? Is this a single woman living her best life? Is this a family man, Christian man, who has a child with developmental issues, who's going to be more empathetic to what you're saying? Is there something in there that connects you that you can build a bridge for communication on? So as advocates, one of the things you really want to do is learn about the lawmaker you're going to go and sit in front of, and know who represents you, because that lawmaker may go on the House floor and say, hey, by the way, Representative Gilliard, I met with your constituent, right? And that's going to open up a conversation with me and them. We've never had a relationship. I've been dying to try to create a relationship. So this is my entry into having a relationship with him, because I need his vote on something. So there's a motive there.
Great, Matt.
Yeah, no, I agree with what both these gentlemen said. I think the one other thing to think about when you're developing an advocacy plan or beginning the process of advocating for whether it be policy change or funding increases or other things is to try to identify where the opposition is going to come from, right? I mean, a lot of folks, I think a lot of people go into this just assuming, oh, I think this is a great idea. Everybody's going to think this is a great idea. Well, that's not the reality. And most times, you know, they're just as you're as passionate about this in one way, there might be somebody or everybody else on the other side of it equally, hopefully not as equally passionate against it, but there is going to be opposition to most things that are proposed to happen. And the sooner you can identify that, or even, you know, think about that and start to counter it, the better off you are, right? If you jump into this full blown and then you get sideswiped by, you know, some opposition that you hadn't foreseen or hadn't thought about, it can often derail things pretty quickly. And so we encourage, we do this ourselves, you know, when we at Michigan's Children get involved with new issues, we immediately sit down and think, all right, who's going to be opposed to this? What can we do to soften that opposition, to try to mitigate some of that right off the bat, so that we can get things rolling in a positive direction sooner rather than later.
Great, thank you. As I look at you guys, I jokingly think about there's a great amount of knowledge up here when you talk about the years. That's not a crack on these guys, but it speaks to the fact that there's so much turnover and you have so many new individuals coming. So another benefit of this panel is the institutional knowledge. So I see some members of the Michigan Kinship Care Coalition here. Yesterday was a Dome Day. You guys were up here advocating. We were up here advocating. You don't have to raise your hand when we talk about how intimidating this process can be, right? So I'm going to shift back to the panel with their institutional knowledge and say, how do you help individuals overcome the intimidation factor of coming to the Michigan Capitol? No matter, you were just in DC a little while ago, how these capitals, whether it's the state capitol or the U.S. Capitol, and those individuals who house these hallowed halls can be intimidating, and how do you overcome that? I'll start with you, Harvey.
I treat everybody like you're my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, with the utmost respect. You know, when you're coming in, you know, I may not know you, you may live on the other side of the state, but I'm gonna treat you the way I would want someone to treat my mother if they walked into their office. I'm gonna try to be as accommodating as possible. I'm going to really hone in on my listening skills, and if you see me, I'm always writing notes. So I'm trying to write notes based on what you're telling me. And I'm trying to develop in my mind at that point, okay, what am I gonna be able to tell this person that I'm not gonna let them down, but I'm not gonna give them any, you know, hope that, yeah, he's a solid yes on us, you know. And a lot of times what you're gonna do when you go in and you talk to people is you're gonna feel lawmakers out. Is this person really into what I'm saying? You know, is this guy half asleep? And again, I try to be as hospitable as possible, and then at the end of the meeting, I always ask, is there any doors that I need to open up for you? Are you having problems getting into a certain lawmaker's office or something like that that I can help you with? Yeah, so Representative Jackson, you know what? That's my guy. I know him. Let me go give him a call. I'll text him right now. Let him know, you know? So stuff like that.
For me, I like to always establish rapport first. I think that's just so important, just like we were talking. Find something in common to discuss before you just get right to the issue. And I think that when you build, and that's what lobbyists do, we like to build relationships. So once you establish rapport with someone, find something, a common interest, just get to know them. Ask them a little bit about themselves. Tell them a little bit about you, a little bit about your background. You may find that you have a lot of things more in common than you may even have apart. And then dive into the subject matter. Make sure that you have a subject matter expert with you. Again, that's someone that you may want to bring along with you that knows the issue a little better than you do and be able to discuss it. And then again, I think that Harvey hit it right on the nail on the head at the end, and I always ask people, is there anything I can do for you? I mean, it takes 2 seconds to say something like that. And you know what? It may be something that you do for them. And they'll be more inclined to help you than they would to hurt you. So, and I think that backtracking on what you said, Matt, earlier when you discussed trying to find out who your opponent is or who will oppose a particular policy or bill, oh my God, you hit it right on the nail. That is, you need to know that before you even go into the office. Just have an idea, and if you do know that, see if you can't engage with them and soften their approach, or at least get them to neutral, because that's where you want. You either want support, or it's either going to be they're going to support you, they're going to be neutral, or they're going to oppose you.
And if they're not going to support you, you don't want them fighting against you.
You don't want them against you. You want them to just be quiet.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right, Strauss.
That's called
That's
neutral.
Right.
Take it as a win. It's
Yep.
gotta be like that.
That's a win.
No, there's a lot to this question. I like what both these guys said, but there's a lot to this. And so, you know, we do a lot of advocacy trainings, right, as an advocacy organizations, and we always really stress to folks that you have to be confident in this. You have to understand that these people work for you. I mean, you're voting, especially your legislators, but you're voting to send them to be your representative in your voice in this governmental process. And so I think people need to be continually reminded of that. And to walk into these rooms and these meetings with confidence, and with the confidence knowing that these folks work for you and are there to answer for you. Now, it's not as easy, and it's intentionally intimidating. They try to make these offices intimidating. DC's even worse. I was out in Congress. It's ridiculous. I mean, these big, huge doors, and these big, come on. I have zero patience for that. But I mean, they intentionally, and a lot of the folks in the office want it to feel that way and want to feel that way. And we try to encourage people to not let them, and to get people to understand. I mean, Dwayne made a point earlier about being a multi-client lobbyist, and you need to know a little bit about a lot of things. A legislator is the exact same, right? You're expected to vote on all of these issues, most of which you don't know anything about,
That's right?
And people, I mean, so another thing we always stress to folks is to recognize that your legislator is not going to be an expert on all these issues, and certainly probably isn't going to be an expert on the issues you care about. You're the experts, really. You're coming to them, and really, if you're going to be a good legislator, what you need to do is you need to identify folks, especially constituents or folks in your district, or folks connected to these issues that you trust and that you value their opinion on to give you advice on these issues. Because I don't know, when I was in office, I was from Alpena, my district was 6 counties in the northeastern part of the Lower Peninsula. I went all the way over to Grayling. Well, in Grayling, the economy was much different than what it was in Alpena. It was all about logging and lumbering and timber. I didn't know anything about the timber industry. Well, quickly I identified a few people in that industry in my district, in the Grayling area, that I knew I could talk to when issues about logging and other things came up that I knew were going to be important. It's no different on child advocacy, children's issues, and other things. I mean, some of these folks will have some knowledge and experience about it. A lot of them don't. So I think recognize that you are the experts, that these people work for you, and try not to let that intimidation wall that they try to build and try to create stand in the way. And the other thing I'd add, kind of to Dwayne's last point and Harvey's last point, yes, you don't want people out there actively, working against you. So oftentimes a neutral is a win. But also, we encourage people not to waste their time. I mean, you'll go into some of these meetings and you can tell right away. Either the person doesn't care, the legislator either doesn't care that anything about your issue. Well, don't waste your time trying to get them to care about it. Or maybe they're just bad. Maybe they're just not good at their job. I mean, there's a lot of legislators up here who just aren't good. They're not influential. They're not influencing their colleagues. They're here collecting a paycheck and not doing much. Don't waste your time either. Like Wayne said earlier, identify the champions, identify the folks that will be supportive and can help get what you want to get done, and focus your energy and efforts on those.
Great. So what I'm going to do now is I have another question for the panel. But after this question, I want to defer back to the audience. I want you guys to kind of be thinking of what you have. Take it back to elementary school, no dumb question. We're here trying to get information. Coming back to these gentlemen, Harvey, you touched on it a little bit when you talked about the financial aspect of what the cost-benefit analysis of running for office is. Matt, you just talked about the economy when it comes to certain things, and Dwayne wearing the bow tie, he's talking about money. You already know what that's all about. So let's talk about the financial aspect, and I pose this to the panel. You're not necessarily a long-standing advocacy group like the Michigan Kinship Care Coalition, for example. I see where I'm going with this, right? You're something that you're very passionate about. You heard our keynote speaker from Mother and Justice talk about what led her into that. So, gentlemen, we have a situation where there's very important issues that you want to advocate for. You may even have support from the community as well, right? But you really don't have the financial wherewithal at this moment, so you may think, to be able to get started. So what do you do in these financially challenging times when you may not necessarily have, a war chest to start your advocacy work? Harvey, I'll start with you.
So I'm in that situation now in the work that I do. I don't have a big PAC. I don't have a PAC. Whatever.
Kind of explain what a PAC is?
Oh, the Political Action Committee. So this is, an account that you create, or you can put a bunch of money in, and then you can write checks to lawmakers that you want to work with and whatnot to help support them in their reelection efforts. So that's important because lawmakers want to get reelected. They need money to do it, right? But I don't have a PAC. So when I call up a lawmaker, I'm using my personality and whatever talents I got to create a meeting to be able to go in there and set up, the conversation with the lawmaker about the issues. And then what I try to do is some follow-up with them, whether it be email or if they have follow-up questions. I try to grab their phone number so I can start, a text or whatever, and try to build a relationship that way. Because if I had to do it on my own, whining and dining lobbyists, I don't know what a bill is like these days, but I'd probably be, 40 grand in? I mean, my God. Trying to wine and dine people over steaks and lobsters and $200 bottles of wine. It can get expensive if you're a big firm, you can absorb that. But when you're an advocate like you don't have that money. So you're basically just calling up, begging for meetings, being polite in the meetings. The other thing, in your own district, if there are congressional district meetings, if there's community meetings, like in Detroit, there's events all over the place. You'll run into people at those places. You engage them there, okay? That's worth just as much as calling up for 3 months trying to get a meeting. You can get a 15-minute meeting right there over a pretzel, right? And so, so those are some of the things that I do and that I find helpful. I'm a little bit of an advantage because I'm a former member, so there's a little bit of grace that people give me and courtesy that people will extend. But as the years go on, you were who? People forget.
one?
Well, honestly, I've never been in this situation.
You just write the check.
When he said 40 grand, he said, that's light work. What you talking about?
So I don't know what this is we're talking about, but anyway, no, honestly, I've got clients that don't have a lot of money either, believe it or not, and nonprofits and whatnot. But you work with what you have, and I gotta at least, Matt and Leslie, I gotta put it in the commercial for lobbyists. If you do have the money and you can't afford a lobbyist, we do serve a good purpose, and we can open up those doors. We have built those relationships with representatives, with their staff, so that we can get things accomplished on your behalf, or again on our client's behalf. So, because we're the ones who are, giving money to PACs. We're the ones who are taking them out to dinner, building relationship with them, having drinks, doing all the difficult stuff. It's hard. It's tough. It's a tough life, right? It's tough looking this good, and but we do that on your behalf. And again, I've got a lot of municipal clients, like I said, like the city of Inkster. They have a hard time even paying their retainer, but it's better to have somebody to advocate for you. Somebody can open up those doors, than you not being able to make a phone call and get those doors open up for yourself. So we do serve a purpose for what that's worth.
And what you're providing today, not to be funny, to come here and share
Absolutely.
whatnot.
So just real quick before we get to that, but I mean, in what Harvey described, and Lindsay, your question is spot on from a child advocacy standpoint, right? We don't have the PAC. I mean, this is what we do, right? But what we do as a people, we got people that care about kids and families. Absolutely. And so what we have to do is we really have to try to energize and motivate and galvanize the people to stand behind us. We can be on the front line saying we should do this because this is the best thing for kids and for families. And we know that there's tens of thousands of people behind us that agree with us. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while, we need some of those folks to call and say, yes, I agree. Or send an email saying, yes, I agree. Because we don't have the PACs. We don't have the thing. Michigan's unique. I think something that people don't often realize as well. Michigan's somewhat unique in having a full-time legislature. We're one of only 3 or 4 states that have a full-time state legislature. Most of the others are part-time. And so, but with the full-time legislature, it necessarily creates this bigger game where you have more PAC money, you have more outside interest, more political interest games involved, and all of that, which makes it harder for child advocates and others to keep up with that game and having to be out front and really get the people behind them. Not to say that the part-time legislature is the panacea either. What happens in a lot of states with part-time legislatures is those legislators then have to have another job, and let's say they're 3 months out of the year, their legislature's in session. It's a part-time legislature. Well, for the other 9 months out of the year, they need to have a job. So what do? They go to work for the special interest. They work for the Farm Bureau. They work for the municipal league or the city government organizations or others. Well, then when they get in there to vote, the rest of their paycheck is paid for those folks. So it's even a more direct, influence of political influence and political issues. But so, I mean, what Harvey said is absolutely right, and the question is at the forefront. What we need to be able to do as child advocates is a lot of us, those of you that come here, that take the initiative, that are on the front lines of this, be willing to be out there on the front lines with the meetings, but knowing that you have tens of thousands of people behind you that agree with you, feel the same way, and every once in a while we need those folks to do their part as well.
Just to build off this point, let me tell you, a lot of, I think, organizations at this level don't really understand the power they have, and he's kept emphasizing we have tens of thousands of people behind us. When a lawmaker receives multiple calls from multiple constituents in the district, I'm talking about 5 calls, 10 calls, and then you go back, okay, I read this letter, I go back, oh, this person's a regular voter, there's something going on. I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling you. I want to know what's going on. I received your letter. I want to talk to you about this. We could talk on the drive home. We could talk Saturday at a coffee shop. There's something that's going on in the district that has people concerned. I need to be attentive to that. Why? Because if I'm not, I don't want them organizing against me with another candidate in the primary. And I mean, from a very self-serving standpoint, right? So that's the power you have. If there's a bill, there's a policy issue, if there's a funding thing that's going on, That's the power you have. I don't care if it's 3 people or if it's 30 people that's calling. They're going to respond to some degree because they know that this is important to their district. And I can tell you, and I'm sure you've heard it, in caucus, like, I can't support this because the people in my district, I'm getting a lot of calls about this.
Absolutely.
And that strategy does work.
And it doesn't take as many as you think.
That's right.
As already said, I mean, if 5 calls on an issue it gets your attention.
It's that one call from that one person who's really engaged in the district. Mr. Santana, I want you to vote for that bill. That lady controls 50
Great. I want to get this question, but Harvey just informed me that Foreman is en route, so we'll be able to get some great information for her going there. And to Matt's point about those 5 calls, sometimes it takes twisting arms just for the members to do the 5 calls, referring to the advocacy groups.
Yeah.
So I want to emphasize that point, because people are so worried that Harvey's going to pick up the phone and grill them, as opposed to being a subject matter expert. So even though it can be 5 calls, like Matt says, you got to make the call.
Do you think the form letters work? Like, what as legislators, like all those Head Start form letters that we put out, like I just get auto responses. What do you think?
Yeah, you're gonna get an auto response, but let me tell you what happens behind the scenes. If I get 5, this happened. So Tim Bledsoe from the Grosse Points one time introduced a bill banning pit bulls in the state of Michigan. My God, I must have gotten 500 form letters from dog owners across the state. Do not ban my pit bull. He's a member of my family. Roar! The same week, we had a vote on lifting the cap on charter schools. Not one form letter came in. And so, the banning of the pit bulls didn't go anywhere. The raising the cap on charter schools did. But do they work? It depends. So some offices, what they'll do is they'll take each form letter, because you have to put your address and everything, and they'll sort it out. They'll go and figure out how many of these are my constituents. And so what'll happen is that somebody showed up at a meeting somewhere and said, need you to fill out this form letter. So now you got 50 people from your district, and then once you start calling the back and figuring out what happens, it depends on the impact of what the form letter is going to do and not do.
Yeah,
But it does work to a degree.
Yeah, I would say they don't hurt, right? I mean, I think different legislators will respond differently, and I think a more personal, in maybe more engaged, direct communication could be more effective, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
I'm going to go to your question 1 second, but I do want to welcome Representative Morgan Foreman coming in. Ladies in the seat, House floor, she totally embodies everything that we're discussing. I'll let you gather yourself for a moment, unless you want to have a comment to say hello and welcome.
I don't answer form letters. That's what I'm saying. I'm kidding. I do. I don't answer all of them. I do. You said okay. I don't. My office is busy, and we get a lot of them, and that would it would not be a good use of time for my staff to answer every single form letter, especially on nights when we get spammed, which happens. You can get 1,000, 2,000 letters. So I usually try to use social media to cover that, or my newsletters and other things like that. But like individual things, of course, I answer. But I just jumping in the conversation there. I do not answer form letters.
So perfect time, and why don't you give us a little recap of the last 15 hour, 24 hours of your day? I know, I got it right here. I just want to give her some deference coming in.
Yeah, so today has been a very interesting day here. Thursdays are usually what I call, the Republicans have called it the Thursday surprise. I call it Tricky Thursday. I call Wednesdays what the fuck Wednesday. I call Tuesdays terrible Tuesdays. Tuesday is actually the middle of the week if you think about it, because the week starts on Sunday. I'm not arguing with anybody about that. So Tuesday is the middle of the week, and it sucks. Wednesday is hump day, but Tuesday is absolutely trash. It is in the middle of the week. You are too far removed from the weekend to go back, and too far from a weekend to go forward. You're just stuck right there on Tuesdays. This week, it was kind of discussed last week if we were going to have session this week, but since we are now adjourned until June 3rd, because we are most of us are going to the Mackinac Policy Conference next week, we won't be having session in both chambers. Today we took up some bills that I don't think should have even been bills. The bill sponsor of that agrees with that. She said this shouldn't even be an issue, and I agree with her because we should not be regulating the genitalia of children. And so I voted no on these bills, whatever House bill number they are. I've lost count. I voted no on those bills today because I was an athlete. I played all sorts of sports, but I was also the kicker on my football team. And I, unlike,
Where's Linda?
he can sit right there, I'm not moving.
President Vanderwall, come on in.
You can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, just got done with sessions. You know how
Yeah.
it works.
So, I voted no on those bills. That's my prerogative. That's how I felt was the best to vote for those as a former educator, as an athlete, as a former athlete, and somebody who did play on a boys' sports team. And nobody knew that I was a girl until I took my helmet off. I was literally just the kicker, and that was just because the football coach saw me kicking soccer and was like, I need you to help us win. And we didn't, Belleville did not win a state championship until recently. So that's been my day. I had a slower day today than usual. I specifically asked my staff to keep my Thursdays just a little bit lighter. Wednesdays are a heavy day. Wednesdays I have committee back to back. I serve on the Health Policy Committee with this gentleman next to me, Representative Curtis Vanderwall. And I am on the Natural Resources and Tourism Committee. He's also on that committee. He's not the chair of that one. So I have like committee back to back, and right now I'm experiencing about 2-hour drives to work because of construction from Ann Arbor. So I can, no matter what I do, I just can't make it on time. It's hard. So I have longer days on Wednesday, so I try to keep my Thursdays light, and so that I can get back home and get back into the community on Thursdays once session is over. Meeting with a lot of groups. I had a full calendar of meetings this week. Met with some great organizations, met with some people trying to convince me otherwise on decisions that I've made. That's something that I am the type of person whose mind can be changed on some things, and on some things it cannot be changed. And so they wanted to try to convince me of other things, and that was nice. Thank you for wasting your time, and thank you for the notebook. So that's really it. We're just preparing. A lot of us are preparing next week to go to the Mackinac Policy Conference. I am a conference nerd, so I might be one of the only legislators in the Grand Hotel actually partaking in learning and doing things, and everybody else is going to be pretty wasted down on the island. But it's a good time. It's a great learning and networking experience. And so I'm looking forward to that as I'm a first-term legislator, my first time going as a legislator and not a staff member having to break into the Grand Hotel from the kitchen to go sneak into sessions.
And you won't miss the last ferry, right?
I will not miss the last ferry because I'm staying on the island. So, and no thanks to my favorite lobbyist 2 seats away from me who was not able to help me secure a room on the island.
So with that,
There are no rules, so I'm just joking. There are a lot of new rules and now the new laws passed and things like that, but I did, to no help of anybody, find a room on the island myself.
Representative Vanderwall, you want to say a few things?
I don't know if I was gonna get a chance or not.
Gonna thank Dwayne for the room.
what we were doing, we were just kind of giving a chronology of what the past day has been like, and of course with the session title being everything you need to know. But please, with the time
Well,
we have.
it's been a wild and very busy week. And I've actually met with some of you that are in the room here today, and I appreciate your time. But you know what, most the folks that do know me and know that I stay extremely busy in the district. When I'm in the district, I usually have meetings all day long. started Monday morning down at Trinity Health and then back up to Manistee, then back to Ludington for meetings, and then my last meeting ended at 9:15 on Monday night, and I said, nah, I'm just gonna get up at 5 o'clock and drive to Lansing, and then my first meeting started at 8:30 and ran, as we finished up, a meeting on, CMH with a group of 6 legislators on what we can do to try to help the system a little bit better and actually provide the service and hold our CMHs accountable to making sure that when somebody goes through their treatment program and they've been released from that we just don't send them back out into the marketplace and never follow back up to see what's happening and is something starting to reoccur again that we need to be involved with. Wednesday morning, I start off with Bible study in the morning at 7 o'clock and moved through my day. Had a lot of meetings, session, finished my last meeting talking with 340B, if anybody knows what that is. But it's a process of bills right now that we're working on that the hospitals really count on. Big Pharma, of course, is feeling that they're being taken advantage of.
That's who was in my office trying to convince me of other
You know,
things.
so we've got a lot of work. We've come a long ways to making sure that 340B will continue the way that it's supposed to. We can make sure that people feel that it's being applied to the areas that it needs to be applied. And part of my concern is that we really want to target to make sure the underserved areas are getting the full benefit of the 340B dollars that get kicked back into the system. So that is something that we've been working really hard to make sure that we can really advocate that happens and we protect the original intent of what it is, and it's just not about chasing dollars. And that's the scary thing about healthcare right now. I think we'll all agree that healthcare has become big business, and sometimes we're forgetting what the true outcomes that we're trying to reach and making sure that we have access to care. And part of that's the consolidation of our hospital systems. I mean, for anybody that's over in this area, you've got Henry Ford buying up pieces, you got Corewell buying pieces, you have Michigan Health, Munson up in the Manistee area. And what happens is they start consolidating services and they move it to their main campus, and all of a sudden, the people that are the most vulnerable people now are driving hours to get to a hospital to actually have the procedure they need to be done. And you know what, we need to fix that. And it is a battle that I really love being involved with. We've done some pretty cool things over this is starting my 8th year down here, 6 years in healthcare, starting my 7th year right now. So we're really excited about what we've done. Prior authorization is a big piece that we got done. PBM reform, and now we've got to go back in because the pharmacy benefit managers have backdoored and started pulling more money from our independent pharmacies, which if we lose our pharmacies, what are we left with? So that was a great meeting, and then today has just been meeting session that went longer than expected. Sorry about that. And then I'll work my best to see if I can make a 6 o'clock meeting back in the district, but I think I'm gonna be a little late, so. But
Representative Fisher, you've been so patient, thank you.
Man,
Yeah.
I appreciate everything on the information. I wish I would have wrote my note down because it was sharp initially because it was stemming off of, it's a little dull now, but it was stemming off of I guess I felt a little anxiety when it was around, when we was talking about PACs, because you unpacked that, got the understanding, but then when I heard the 40,000, and then I know it was laughter, not like it was a negative laughter, but then I was trying to follow everything, and I heard the laughter, like how the 40K is lightweight, but then I started seeing the picture of different clients, like different levels of, I guess, money behind things. I guess as I'm following it, the anxiety came, because I'm in the trenches with the, working with foster youth, working with the most marginalized populations, and I live in Southwest Detroit. So when I think about corporate, like corporate level populations, pollution and
I'm from
grassroots
Southwest.
stuff with the small groups fighting for environmental issues in our neighborhood. On top of it, it kind of made me, I was trying to understand those dynamics, but then also like, how do you close the inequity? I couldn't even figure out how to frame my question, because it was like, well, if it's the people with the most money, corporate and lobbyists, and then like this, like 10,000, help me out, but I was trying to figure out where does that gap close if it's constantly in every space like that.
And
That's the
we
fundamental
all
issue.
get you.
No, that's the fundamental issue.
We know what you're saying.
It's a fundamental issue of American politics right now. It's a fundamental issue of American politics right now. Is the influence that the money has over the system. And it's at all levels. It's at the local level. You see it in Detroit as prevalent as anywhere. At the local level, you see it certainly at the state level. Like I said, Michigan's got a full-time legislature, which is unique. So we see corporate interests and money and political interests play out even heavier here than most other states, but obviously at the national level, you see it as well in congressional elections up and through the presidential election. I think we have big challenges as a society to deal with this, right? I mean, we're not going to solve it here in this room. We're not going to solve it in Michigan alone, but I think as a country, we got to start to think about most other civilized countries, most other democratic countries around the world have implemented much different policies around the money impact in their political campaigns and in their elections. We have not done that. We've gone the opposite way in the United States of America, where the money involved in our elections and in our campaigns is outrageous. And there's no other country in the world that does it the way that we're doing it. And we got to figure that out as a society, because it's not, who's getting screwed? The kids that we care about are Michigan's children. A lot of things. That's right. The way we're fighting, though, is with the people, right? We have people that can vote for folks that care about the issues that we care about. Because we cannot compete with the political interest and the money that's involved behind a lot of these groups.
And real quick, I just realized the exact question what it was. To that point, in your position, seeing how you got all these different clients at different levels, that's the question I was getting at. Are you more empowered with the clients that have the more money, or are you equally able to use your skill set? I guess it's you with the different clients. How does that look for representation?
Thank you. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
All my clients get the same level of service that everyone gets, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Whether or not it's a client that pays a retainer of, X amount of dollars a month to a low-paying client, they all get the same good service, because that's just who I am. Okay. Now, whether or not I buy into the advocacy on a personal level, because I'll just give you a quick example. I was a police officer for 29 years, right? So I represent End Gun Violence Michigan. I'm very passionate about ending gun violence, just like Representative Foreman knows. But many times we've been on the phone about things of this nature. So I get a phone call after I pick up this client a couple of weeks later out of DC. Let's say NRA or somebody's looking for a lobbyist in Lansing. I had to make a decision. Am I going to go with who's going to pay me all this money with the NRA, or am I going to go with something that I kind of feel, closer to? So obviously that's what I did.
Let me chime in here, because Morgan highlighted something that we've brought up. The first question out the gate. Remember what I said? If you decide to run for office, you better know who you are, what you're about, what you believe in, what you will and what you will not accept. Because if you don't, that place is going to twist you up and nuts. Look at how many meetings these two individuals have had in the last 24 hours and what their work week is like. I will tell you, my time up here, every 15 minutes I had to figure out who was the biggest liar. Because at 9 o'clock, you feed me this. At 1 o'clock, I'm having a different meeting with someone who has a contrary opinion than the guy at 9 o'clock, okay? As far as the money is concerned, okay? But let's talk about the whining and the dining. When I was up here, it was normal. You call me up, hey, let's go to dinner, let's talk. I got a client that wants to meet you. We go, we order the food, we talk about the issues, I learn more. It's a different type of setting, okay? Same thing happens in corporate America. The only difference is that we're elected officials, so there's this idea that, this steak dinner done bought this guy's vote, right? And so that's the impression that a lot of people have, because the movies and everything else probably made it that way. But it's a part of doing business. Breakfasts, lunches, dinners, outings, golf outings, sporting events. You get to know people, and then I get to feel out, okay, you ain't bullshitting me, man. This guy lying to me. you get to see it in a different way. So it's as useful for us as it is for them, right? But again, when it comes to like political donations and all that, listen, you can have just as much power. How many people have gotten their checkbook out and wrote a $100 check to the candidate of their choice? And how many people have actually gone in and said, let me look at, see what this person's about versus what this person, but let me call them up, let me see what's going on here, right? That's your job as advocates, okay? I don't have a PAC. I gotta pick up a phone and ask Kurt and ask Morgan for a meeting to talk about something that they may not want to talk to me about, you know what I mean? That's my job. He has the same job, whether he has a big PAC or not. They may not want to talk to him. I don't care how much money you got or how many steak dinners you buy. I don't want to talk to you about this issue. But again, that lawmaker has to know who they are and what they're about.
Yes.
So this is what we need to do. We were needing to make a hard stop at 3, but I wanted to take advantage of some presidential privilege because we got the president and CEO right here. I would like to get to these questions, but I also want to prep our panelists that once we finish, if we can just get a brief remark from each of you summarizing what we have. But we have to be mindful of time. I know David had his hand raised, young lady had her hand raised, so we'll do those, and then we'll come through the panel. We better wrap up. We can use that presidential privilege.
Absolutely.
All right, got the president right there. Please, David.
I gotta admit, I've made a mistake for the last 3 years in approaching the legislature for the Michigan Kinship Care Coalition. We've identified as a coalition a number of things that need to be changed, mainly policy-wise, that would better support informal kinship families. We believe that most, if not all of them, could be at least partially achieved by just having the department take a fresh look at their policies and implement some new ways to better serve, better get families some existing TANF dollars, better allow some families to access some federal funding for adoption subsidy, guardianship subsidy. I've studied this. I've run these programs in a lot of different states, including as the state child welfare director. So I know that there's more flexibility in the department than they've assumed. But when we tried to get the department to do some pilots to test these other approaches, we were told, well, we've already got pilots, so we'll do that later. But then when I approached the legislature and the Kinship Coalition to direct the state to do these pilots and to look at some new approaches, we were told that we'd have to attach at least $1 million to it, and then they could put it in the boilerplate.
David, for the sake of time, can you get a direct
The question is, how do we get the legislature to assume some oversight and guidance without making it a money issue?
I can jump in. I think we've started to see some of those things happen now, and part of it's because you guys come in and chat with us and we can challenge back. I don't think that healthcare or a lot of the things that we do down here should be partisan issues, but sometimes they end up that way. But one of my sayings that I've always had is, we can either change, we're forced to change, or we become a dinosaur. And right now we're heading down the path of some of these things because we've been unwilling to change for a long time, that if we're forced to change or we wait too long, we become a dinosaur, and then our children that we have in the system are left behind. And I think you guys know I'm quite concerned about that, and I know we talk about in district meetings. You and I have met how many times, Deb? I mean, it's important to me. It doesn't always mean that there has to be anything that goes with it, other than I need to know the information and I need to be able to slowly work that change. So that's how I would suggest it gets done.
I would say, just one thing quickly, David. I think that this is one benefit of having divided government. Divided government in the legislature is that when we have divided government, the departments are much more responsive to legislators. When we have uniparty government, the departments will ignore the legislators because they're going to go along with the governor. We have a different dynamic. When we have divided government, my experience specifically was we have much more responsive, much better response from the departments under divided government, from legislators of both parties.
It's not always fun.
No, they're difficult meetings, but it's true.
So we go to one more question and we'll be able to summarize for this great panel, please.
This isn't really more of a question, but a comment going back to your conversation. There is an app called Good Unite Us, and it gives the federal funding of all the different companies and where it goes. So as a consumer, you can put your money towards those organizations that have similar philosophy as you, just because that's where that money is ultimately going. So.
Sunlight's gonna make it everything better, so I'm all for that.
So what we're gonna do with the remainder of the time, we're gonna let the panelists give us some closing remarks. I'm gonna ask that we stay still for a photo afterwards as well. But however, you guys have done it. I wanna give a hand before.
Listen, elected officials, believe it or not, they're very normal people with a very important job, okay? Before this job, they were doing something else. When they leave this job, they'll be probably going back to that or doing something else, okay? Remember what I said. If you're gonna go meet with a lawmaker, know something about that lawmaker. Try to establish rapport, as Wayne said, and just be honest about what it is you want. Be direct, because they're not gonna be an expert at your subject. You've got maybe 15, 30 minutes to really try to give them the information they need to make the best decision. And then, do the follow-up after that. And just remember, organize and make sure that you identify who the lawmaker is and identify your members from those districts to place those personal calls.
Right, thank you, Howard.
The thing I think I say again, just like Matt and everyone said, be confident. I think that's just so important. When you walk in with these folks, be confident in what you're trying to persuade them to do on your side. Make sure you do your homework. Make sure that you're succinct and to the point, and that they can understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, so that they can get it on paper and get it out there for you. Bottom line.
Absolutely. Don't let the big doors and the fancy desks and the fancy titles intimidate you.
Yeah.
These people work for you.
Representative.
Yeah, and it comes down to relationships. Everybody has a different opinion. I have my own opinions, but what's nice is that every time I meet with somebody, I learn something. And it's something different than maybe what I envisioned in my brain. So form letters, folks, they don't work. I mean, honestly, I
don't even respond to it.
I had 1,300 on the bill that we passed out of mine yesterday out of committee. I had 1,300 form letters come in from all over the state. I mean, I read one, I see it. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, they get lost in the mix then, and especially we try to pick them out, but when you get that many. So take your time. When you come in with a group, make sure you're all on the same page. If I get in there and I have 3 people or 4 people or 5 people that come in and they're not focused, then the whole meeting goes to pot, and you're kind of like, what did I just do for my half hour? So take your time, because you can make the change, and you will make the change, and it doesn't. I'd say you thought church politics were slow? Wait until you get in here. It moves very slowly in Lansing, but it's done for a reason. If we move fast, bad things happen.
Right.
So people ask me all the time, where did I learn politics? And for me, it was the church. And I have seen things differently in Lansing as a legislator now, because previously I was a staff member for about 4 years before I ran for my seat. So I can give you a little bit of perspective on that. As a staff member, always respect the staff, especially if you're meeting with them. They influence a lot of what the legislator is going to talk about, do, or whatever. Our job as legislators is to know a little about a lot. We have our expertise areas, but there are some things that I'm going to be very honest with you. I do not care about cryptocurrency. Do not bore me to death on it. I'm not going to care. But do I care? It affects the lives of Michiganders? Yes. Do I care as a person individually? No, I do not care. So I'm going to listen to that perspective, but come with the facts. Come with, good one-pagers that help some of people. You have to think about how people learn. Come with good one-pagers. Come, greet. Don't be starstruck. That's always weird to me. I am a normal person. I am going to drive home today and stop and get a Coke Zero and chicken nuggets because I eat like a toddler on my way home from session. It's like my thing, right? It's like a decompression. But I'm a normal person. I have normal things. Yesterday I wasn't in session. My grandmother got sick. I drove up here. She got sick. Her caregiver called. I jetted home. I did crimes to get home, okay? Like, I'm a normal person with normal things, and I care about things. I come from John Day Bingle country. And just like Harvey said, I am not an important person, but I have an important job. And I feel like lives are in my hands and blood is on my hands. And the way that I operate is that right now, my job right now in the legislature is what God has called me to do. And if I am not dutiful over it, then I will have to pay for that at some other point in my life. That doesn't mean an afterlife or anything. Karma is real. I'm seeing it happen to somebody I know right now, and I'm like, that's what you get. That's exactly what you get. So, but when you come to advocate, be strong. Know what you're talking about. Use your morals and scruples, and then get it out of our way. We have to eat and go to the bathroom. It's real. It's tight.
So with that, before we give this great panel a round of applause, give yourselves a round of applause for being very engaged.